In 1965, the average American household spent $120 a year on professional repairs. That's it, $120 for the entire year. Today, that same household spends over $3,000. And it's not because things break more often. It's because somewhere between your grandfather's garage and your driveway, an entire arsenal of knowledge disappeared. Your grandfather never called a repairman, not because he couldn't afford one, because the idea wouldn't have even occurred to him. He had 11 skills that made him completely self-reliant. And every single one of them used to be considered basic knowledge for a man. Here's what he knew that you were never taught. You remember watching him? Maybe it was a Saturday morning. Maybe it was after dinner on a weeknight. Something broke. The faucet, the lawnmower, the car wouldn't start. And your grandfather didn't reach for a phone. He reached for a toolbox. He didn't look frustrated. He looked focused. Like this was just part of being a man in a house with people depending on him. He'd crouch down or crawl under or climb up. And within an hour, 2 hours, maybe half a day, the problem was solved. No appointment scheduled 3 weeks out. No $200 diagnostic fee. No stranger in your house. Just a man, his tools, and a problem that needed fixing. You watched him do this dozens of times, and you probably thought you'd learn it all eventually, just by being around him. You'd hand him the wrench he needed, you'd hold the flashlight, you'd watch his hands work and think someday that would be you. Except that transfer never happened. Not because you weren't interested, but because the world stopped making space for it. Let's start with the first skill, basic plumbing repair. Your grandfather could fix a leaking faucet, replace a wax ring on a toilet, clear a drain, and repipe a section of copper without breaking a sweat. He knew how water moved through a house. He understood pressure. He knew that if you heard a bang in the pipes when you turned off the sink, you had a water hammer problem, and you needed an air chamber or a pressure regulator. He didn't learn this from YouTube. He learned it from his father, who learned it from his father, in an era when calling a plumber meant waiting 2 weeks and paying a day's wages. So men learned. They had to. By 1950, approximately 60% of American men could perform intermediate plumbing repairs. Today, that number is under 8%. And it's not because plumbing got more complicated. It's because the cost of ignorance got cheaper than the cost of knowledge. When a pipe burst in the winter, your grandfather knew exactly where the shutoff valve was. He didn't panic. He turned off the water, thawed the pipe, patched the split, and had everything running again before the hardware store closed. Second skill, small engine repair. Your grandfather could tear down a lawnmower engine, clean a carburetor, gap a spark plug, and replace a pull-start spring before lunch. He could diagnose a two-stroke problem by ear. If the engine bogged down under load, he knew it was a fuel delivery issue. If it wouldn't start cold but ran fine warm, he knew the choke wasn't closing. He didn't take it to a shop. He had a workbench in the garage with a vise, a set of small wrenches, and a coffee can full of carburetor cleaner. That knowledge saved him thousands of dollars over a lifetime. More than that, it made him independent. When the mower died on a Saturday morning and the grass needed cutting, he didn't spend the weekend waiting for a repair shop to open on Monday. He fixed it in an hour and finished the job. Third, electrical troubleshooting. Not the kind where you call an electrician because the code says so. The kind where a lamp stops working or an outlet goes dead or the porch light flickers. Your grandfather could trace a circuit. He knew how to use a continuity tester. He understood that electricity flows in a loop, and if something stops working, the loop is broken somewhere. He'd check the bulb, then the socket, then the switch, then the wire. Methodical, logical, and he knew which problems were dangerous and which ones just required patience. He rewired lamps, he replaced switches and outlets. He didn't do it because he loved electrical work. He did it because paying someone else to screw in a new light socket felt like paying someone to tie your shoes. Now here's where it starts to hurt. Because these first 3 skills were just the baseline. Your grandfather had 8 more. And the next one is the skill that hits hardest, because this is the one that didn't just fade away. This one was actively removed. Fourth skill, automotive maintenance and repair. Before 1980, the average American man performed 80% of his vehicle maintenance himself. Oil changes, brake jobs, tune-ups, timing adjustments, carburetor rebuilds. Your grandfather could pull a cylinder head, lap the valves, and have the engine back together by Sunday night. He knew that if the car was running rich, you leaned out the mixture. If it was missing at high RPM, you checked the point gap and the condenser. He didn't need a computer. He needed a timing light, a feeler gauge, and an understanding of how an internal combustion engine actually worked. Then, in 1981, General Motors introduced the first mass-market engine control module. By 1996, OBD2 became mandatory. And suddenly, the shade tree mechanic was locked out of his own vehicle. They didn't make engines more reliable. They made them proprietary. The knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because someone decided your dependence was more profitable than your competence. Your grandfather's Chilton manual became obsolete overnight. The skills he spent decades building became worthless because a computer he couldn't access made all the decisions. Fifth, carpentry and woodworking repair. Your grandfather could patch a hole in drywall, replace a rotted board on the porch, hang a door so it didn't stick, and build a shelf that would hold weight without bowing. He owned a handsaw, a hammer, a square, a level, and a block plane. Not because he was a craftsman, because he was a homeowner. When the basement stairs got wobbly, he didn't call a contractor. He pulled the treads, checked the stringers, added blocking where it was needed, and screwed everything back down solid. That repair took 3 hours and cost him the price of a box of screws. Today, that same repair is a $600 service call, minimum. Sixth skill, appliance repair, washers, dryers, refrigerators. Your grandfather understood that these were just machines, motors, belts, switches, thermostats. When the dryer stopped heating, he pulled the back panel, checked the element, and replaced it with a part from the hardware store for $12. When the washer wouldn't spin, he knew it was either the belt or the clutch, and he could swap both in an afternoon. Manufacturers didn't like this. By the 1990s, they started designing appliances that couldn't be serviced without proprietary tools. They moved from screws to clips, from mechanical timers to circuit boards. They made the parts hard to find and the documentation impossible to get. Not because it made the machines better, because it made you dependent. If you've made it this far, you already understand something most people never will. You understand that the skills your grandfather had weren't hobbies. They weren't optional. They were the load-bearing pillars of a self-reliant life. And when those pillars were removed, they weren't replaced with something better. They were replaced with a phone number and a credit card. Seventh skill, sharpening tools, knives, axes, chisels, lawnmower blades, saw blades. Your grandfather knew that a dull tool was a dangerous tool. He had a sharpening stone in the garage, maybe two, a coarse one and a fine one. He knew the angle for a kitchen knife was different than the angle for a hatchet. He knew you worked the blade across the stone in one direction, not back and forth like you're scrubbing a dish. He could put an edge on a blade that would shave the hair off his arm. This wasn't a skill he learned in a class. It was a skill he learned because tools were expensive and you didn't throw them away just because they got dull. You maintained them. And a man who couldn't sharpen his own tools was a man who couldn't be trusted to take care of what he owned. He'd sit on the back step on a summer evening, stone in his lap, working the edge of an axe or a pocket knife. The sound of steel on stone, the smell of honing oil. That was part of the rhythm of his life. Eighth, roofing and gutter maintenance. Your grandfather climbed up on the roof twice a year, spring and fall. He cleared the gutters. He checked the shingles. If he saw a crack or a curl, he pulled the nails, slid a new shingle underneath, and tarred the seams. He didn't wait for a leak to tell him there was a problem. He prevented the leak. And when a storm blew through and took off a section of shingles, he didn't file an insurance claim and wait 6 months for a crew. He bought a bundle of shingles at the lumberyard, pulled out his hammer and his chalk line, and patched it himself. That knowledge saved his house more than once. Ninth skill, painting and finishing, not decorative painting, maintenance painting. Your grandfather knew that wood exposed to weather will rot. So he painted, he caulked. He primed bare wood before the top coat went on. He knew you didn't paint in direct sun or right before rain. He knew the difference between oil-based and latex and when to use each. He painted the trim every few years. He painted the fence. He painted the shed. Not because he enjoyed painting, because he understood that a $30 gallon of paint now saved a $3,000 siding replacement later. Maintenance wasn't a chore. It was an investment. 10th, masonry and concrete repair. When a crack opened up in the driveway, your grandfather mixed a bag of concrete patch, troweled it in, and smoothed it before it set. When the mortar started crumbling out of the brick steps, he repointed them. He knew that water was the enemy. Water gets in the crack, freezes, expands, and turns a hairline into a canyon. So he sealed it. He didn't need a mason. He needed a trowel, a mixing bucket, and an understanding that small problems handled early stay small. Small problems ignored become expensive problems. And here's the 11th skill, the one that might be the most lost of all. Your grandfather could read a situation and figure out what was wrong without a manual. Diagnostic thinking, problem solving. He didn't have an app. He didn't have a form. He had his brain and his experience and the willingness to try something, see what happened, and adjust. When something stopped working, he didn't throw up his hands. He thought about it. What changed? What's different? What does this symptom tell me? He treated every repair like a puzzle, and he got better at solving puzzles the more puzzles he solved. That skill, that confidence, that's what made all the other skills possible. And that's the skill that was never written down, never taught in a classroom, and never replaced by anything. Your grandfather didn't fix the washing machine because he loved doing laundry. He fixed it because his family needed clean clothes, and he was the man in that house. And that meant the problem was his to solve. He didn't call someone because he didn't need to. He had the knowledge, he had the tools. And he had the understanding that being able to solve your own problems was part of what it meant to be a man who took care of his people. That competence wasn't arrogance. It was responsibility. And it didn't come from a book. It came from his father's hands on the same wrench, showing him, teaching him, trusting him to learn. That chain held for generations. Father to son, hands on the same tools. The same problems solved the same way because the way worked. It didn't break on its own. Someone cut it. And they cut it because a man who can fix his own problems doesn't need to buy as many solutions. A man who understands how things work doesn't need to be told what to buy next. That kind of independence was worth something, and someone decided it was worth more to take it away. These skills aren't dead. They're sleeping. And every man watching this video just proved that someone still cares. You can't bring back the world your grandfather lived in, but you can bring your grandson into the garage this Saturday. You can show him what a crescent wrench is for. You can teach him that a problem isn't something you panic about, it's something you think through. You can hand him the tools and let him try. That's how it survived this long, and that's how it survives going forward. If this hit home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because there are a lot more skills they don't want remembered. Next time, we're talking about the one skill your grandfather had that made him completely independent in any weather, on any land, in any situation. And it's the skill they made sure your son would never learn in school.